This week on All Star Fandom, I'm joined by a very special guest, Alex from Batman, the Animated Series podcast. We're going to deep dive into Batman, the Animated Series, everything that came with that series, the voice acting, the storytelling, how that series made Batman into like the Batman we know and love today. So we're going to jump right into this All Star Fandom. Let's talk about it. Welcome to All Star Fandom. This week, like I said, we're joined by Alex from Batman Animated Series podcast. But before we jump into all things Batman, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, do all the social media stuff out there for this show. Batman, it's not Batman Animated Series podcast at show, but it's at All Star Fandom Show on Instagram, on TikTok. Find us on YouTube. So before I butcher any more of that intro, we're going to jump right into this, Alex, because I've been waiting to talk about Batman for a very long time, specifically Batman the Animated Series and what that series meant in like the grander scheme of like animated comic book superhero shows. But before we jump into that, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the people. The floor is yours.
Hi, people. I'm Alex. I'm the co-host of Batman, the Animated Series podcast, which I co-host with my brother, Will. He is a comic book artist, mainly working for DC and Marvel, both a writer and an artist, actually. So he's got a great insight into not only that side of the business, but we both grew up watching the show as brothers, and he just went on to his career, and I just stuck around being a massive Batman fan, specifically the animated series. So we do this podcast where we review episodes. We've had actors from the show come on. We've had directors. We've had writers. We've had a whole lot of people come on the show, and it's been an amazing experience to have their insight. Obviously, they were the ones that were there that created this amazing cartoon. So go check it out. It's on all socials at Batman TAS Pod. That's TAS as in the animated series pod. And you can also find us on pretty much any podcast catcher of choice. If you want Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you do, it's just Batman the Animated Series podcast. Or you can find us on YouTube as well, where sometimes we do our episode reviews into actual video reviews, taking footage from the show, dubbing it over our voices. They're usually silly, they're usually fun, but you know, we got to have fun whilst we're doing it, and it's always fun to make fun of the thing that you love the most. So yeah, go check out all that stuff, and that's basically what we do for a podcast.
I appreciate you hopping on so we can talk about this.
Of course, thanks for inviting me as well. I appreciate it, man.
So we'll jump in to our sort of like Batman Animated Series fandom talk. You sort of gave it a little bit, Alex, of like how you became such a huge fan, but I won't say dig a little deeper, but what was that one thing, that light switch moment, that light bulb moment where it's like, this is my show now? Like, because we all have those sort of moments, right? So what do you, if you remember, like, this is it, I'm all in?
So I remember specifically as a kid, apparently even before I can remember, I was always into Batman. In fact, I was 2 years old when my dad took me to go see Batman 89, right? Like that movie, it was bigger than anything anyone had ever seen.
Yes.
So a seat at the theater, because I couldn't see over the top of the seat, so my dad brought books. And apparently, like, even at 2 years old, I was so quiet because I was just like, wow, this world, this character is amazing. But the thing that really connected with me with the animated series is that it was like, that was one film, right? And once I'd seen that film, you have to wait like a year for it to come out on video. And,
yeah, it wasn't as quick as it is today, you know?
No, definitely not, and that's because of aspect ratios and all sorts of reasons. But the other thing is that like I was like, well, once I've seen that movie, which I did watch a lot, but it was the same thing over and over again, where suddenly I saw this show, this cartoon that was like, okay, that's the Batman theme. I recognize that theme, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like 5 or something, and I was like, I know that theme. And I saw this cartoon, and I was seeing this dark, like, that's Batman. Oh my God. And I remember being like, I've got to watch this show. And what really brought me into it was because I wasn't watching the same thing over and over again. It was a new episode every day. just coming out back to back, and I was like, this is amazing. So yeah, what really sold me was actually something that scared me. I think I was a weird kid. Things that like scared me made me more interested in them. It's like I
Yeah.
like horror films because I don't know. It's just one of those things. So my grandmother had a Batman animated series VHS tape with several episodes on it.
Really?
And
Okay.
one of them was the first episode ever produced, which was on Leather Wings, and
Hmm.
it's the Man Bat episode,
Yeah.
and there was this sequence I remember watching like for the first time when the Doctor turned into the Man Bat,
Hmm.
and
Oh, that was
it's it's
yeah.
frightening,
Yeah.
like
Especially for a
as
younger
a
kid too. That's
oh
a little like, wait a minute, like, am I supposed to be watching this? It's
yeah,
animated though, but yeah, go ahead.
I
I
know.
totally understand.
Yeah, and like that left a big impression on me. And as I've done the podcast, I found out from not only from listeners of our show, but also directors like Dan Reba, who came on our show, who directed tons of episodes of Batman and just all of DCAU in general,
Hmm.
Justice League, Superman, all that stuff. He said, because he was a designer at that point. He's like, that was our goal, was to scare the shit out of kids. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we wanted to do. And I spoke to the director of that episode too, Kevin Altieri, and he said to me, he's like, look, we needed someone that Batman could beat up, that wasn't a human, because we obviously, it was our first episode, and we
Hmm.
couldn't, we had to play by some of the rules, like BSMP were telling
Yes.
people, you can't show this, you can't do that. So he's like, by having a monster, we could have Batman beat up on him. But of course, that transformation sequence was like an ode to 50s horror, he's telling me.
Very much so.
So
Yeah.
and it really left an impression on me where I was scared every time I watched that as a kid. But I was like, I need to see more of this show because I just love the styling. I mean, I could talk about it forever, but
Oh, and we
ultimately,
will. We
that
will.
oh, probably will, yeah. But that was the moment for me where I was like, oh yeah, this is my show, you know.
So very similar story. I was born in '87, so very super young when '89, when
Me
Batman
too.
'89, right? So I didn't
Yeah,
go
yeah.
that young, but I know and I think they're going to be re-releasing Batman '89 like in theaters or here in Atlanta somewhere in the next coming months. So I want to actually see that movie on the big screen for the first time. I think that's like a goal of mine, but it's very similar to your story of like uh, that movie, watched it 100 times, but you wanted more of it. And the thing that got me with Batman animated series was the theme song
Mm,
at the beginning. The theme song, I know it, like, I can hum it by
yeah.
heart. Once you know it, you know it. And there was this cartoon that's using the exact same thing. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is just a continuation of the movie. Like in my mind, that's what I like grasped it as.
Right.
Like, this is just Michael Keaton again. Like this, because the style was the same, and we'll talk about it, but like the art and animation and stuff like that as well. But just that theme song, I hum that theme song to this day. If I was like driving home, when I got older, obviously driving home, and I would see like the leaves in the rearview mirror, are like when like Michael King was driving the Batmobile and you saw the leaves fly out behind him or something like that. So stuff like
I love
that, and
that.
it would trigger. But definitely that's how I became like just that super fan of Batman, and you can honestly say because of that show, that's how I became such a huge Batman fan too. It wasn't
Mm.
through comic books initially. It was just okay. I'm born to this world. Who's my Batman? Michael Keaton. What's next? Until like that, and like Batman Returns, I think came out in '92. So I still got Michael Keaton, and then I still have this show that ran from like '92 to '95. So I was all in, and it really sort of, and we'll talk about it a little bit. I'm sort of jumping ahead, but it sort of instilled in my brain like this is how Batman is supposed to be. And it's not like that once I started reading all the rest of the comic books, right? But this holds up so much in like 2023 still that I've done multiple rewatches on my own in the last few years since like HBO Max. So that's been, again, very similar stories. But for me, that theme song will always be that connecting tissue that this is my show because I love the movie, right?
Yeah, and that title sequence, right? Like, what makes that title sequence so brilliant is there is no actual title saying Batman the
Nothing.
Animated Series.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you get it, right?
Yeah.
Like you see him taking down a couple bank robbers, stands on top of the building, lightning strikes.
And
It's
then
Batman.
yeah,
Everybody
yep.
knows it. You don't have to tell us already after a very unique genius piece of this new, totally different show. This isn't Adam West bow pam, pow wham, like punching guys in the face. This is like this ain't your granddad's Batman. This is
Yeah.
dark. This is gritty.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
good.
Yeah, and you say Adam West, and then you go like Super Friends Batman and all that stuff
Mm.
before. You're like, you've never seen this version of Batman. So we can jump in like sort of like the historical context of the show. Dropped in 1992, ran to about 1995 on like Fox Kids over here. And basically that resurgence happened when Tim Burton, released Batman 89. So that's where we talked about sort of like the Batmania that was of the time,
Hmm.
and it that resurgence made Batman another popular character, like the popular character, it feels like, for superheroes again. And I guess just what we can talk about now is like what do you think set, because this is around the time where we got X-Men that was really good. Spider-Man came out about in middle of this. So we were like in the renaissance of like really good animated cartoon, like superhero cartoons. But what do you think set this apart from those two?
I mean, I know exactly what set it apart, which was it was drawn on black paper. That's the
Hmm.
first thing that I could say. It was the first ever cartoon to be drawn, and they even coined the phrase "deco" from the show
Yes.
because essentially the design is Art Deco. It's 1930s, it's 1920s aesthetic that they were going for. But what's great is that they don't specifically tell you what period it is.
Not
I
at
mean, there's a
all.
few newspaper yeah, I mean, there's a few newspaper clippings that say like 1992 on it and stuff, and you're supposed to believe that this world is 1992, but it's what makes it so timeless.
Hmm.
Like you just brought up X-Men and Spider-Man. Now, just for a brief little side note, if in case any of your listeners are interested, before we did Batman the Animated Series podcast, my brother and I, we did Spider-Man the Animated Series podcast, where we did a deep dive on that show. So we reviewed episodes, had guests from the show, the exact same
Yeah.
thing we're doing with Batman, we did for Spider-Man because we also love that show. Yeah, it was
Hmm.
it was great fun, and
Yeah.
there's I'm not like it's like comparing kids having two podcasts, right? I'm not going to say which one like I
Well,
like more
yeah,
or
I'm not
anything like
gonna
that.
exactly.
Yeah, but the thing that separates Batman, and speaking from a personal level, the thing that made that show stand out more to me and made me want to lean into it more was just the art, the design, the voice acting, and also just the kind of they still had rules they had to follow, but like Spider-Man, you have to use laser guns.
Lasers, yeah, that was a big thing in all of 90s cartoons because of
Yeah.
parents just couldn't get. Yosemite Sam was done. Like there was no more shooting with bullets. There was just straight
Yep.
up lasers. Ninja Turtles did the same.
Same
Um,
thing.
yeah, so I
Spider-Man wasn't even allowed to punch bad guys in the face. There was no
did
punching from
did
Spider-Man.
he not?
The two times in that show he punches someone in the face. That's it. It's everything else is
Really?
just it's leaping kicks to people's chests. He never Spider-Man throws a punch twice in that show. That's crazy. Like if you told Batman, "Hey, you can only kick bad guys, you can't punch them," they would have never have done that show. It's like punching's
No.
just part of it. But yeah, so I think all of the restrictions that Batman didn't have, and they even called them like dark deco weapons and stuff like that. That's how they got away with shooting bullets in
Yeah,
that show
okay.
because you never see the bullet come out of the gun, granted, but also you don't see bullet holes in the same way that you normally they do have bullet holes, but they would call them dark deco weapons, and that's how they got away with it in Batman, which is
Yeah,
crazy to me that they you know
yeah,
they
because
got
now
around it somehow. I don't
because
know.
now since you say that, like if they're shooting at Batman, you saw like the flares on the floor or wherever they were around him. You just saw
Hmm.
flares. Like I think at least is that
You
so
do.
that's
You
what I'm
don't see
remembering
bullet
now.
holes. Yeah, you don't see bullet holes go through wood or like big chunks of pavement or concrete
Yeah.
being chopped up from the bullets. So again, they found a way where instead of just going, let's just use lasers, they found a way to
Yeah.
make it more realistic. And the biggest thing for me that makes it stand out as far as its look and makes it timeless again, besides the period that it's kind of loosely based in, is just the designs that Bruce Timm brought to these characters. Like every single character in Batman the Animated Series is so sleek looking and
Hmm.
so specifically designed for that world, and they're meant to be that look like that, so they're easier to animate. But they've
Hmm.
also got a really great bit of, they've got great depth to them and shading, and they would do matte paintings all the time in Batman the Animated Series. You'd see like beautiful, like almost watercolored,
Hmm.
images sometimes pop up where it's kind of like a fake background, but it looks
It looks so
amazing.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, and with Spider-Man, with X-Men. Now, I never watched X-Men. I think I was one of the only few kids in the world that just didn't watch that show. And
Okay.
I've come back as an adult, and I like still haven't watched all of it because it's just I like a main protagonist, someone that's just going through it. Like I can follow Spider-Man around, I can follow Batman around, and I do love the X-Men, but I don't know, I couldn't attach to one character in that show enough to make me want to keep going.
Totally
You know?
understand it. That show was pretty much like a vehicle for Wolverine, it felt like. Like let's for his popularity, because look at
And
what
he's
came
the
after.
best. He's the
Look what ca-
best, right?
I
Like,
mean,
yeah,
they do they always do Cyclops dirty, man. Like it's just
yeah.
Cy that's another podcast for another day. I could go into but
But the animation in that is so it's all the animation. I believe the studios behind both Spider-Man and X-Men was mostly TMS, Tokyo Movie Shinsho,
okay. Yeah, and you can
and
sort of tell like the first like the seasons of X-Men, how they looked, the stylized of they looked a little shiny at times. It looked like an anime almost, it at
mm,
times. Spider-Man and very colorful, obviously, way more in colorful than Batman would ever become. Um, but for me, I think that's if we're just thinking about like what set that apart, that look again. I mean, I'm gonna agree with you the whole way. You're a resident Batman expert, Batman animated series expert, Alex. So,
I think just massive fan. You can call me a massive fan.
but yeah, but just that style and art, and you talk about like the Art Deco style. They took a lot of that from like Batman '89 too. That's how it felt like such a like a successor of that show,
You're
of
right.
that
Yeah,
movie.
that's how
And
they
now
that's how they started doing Batman the Animated Series because the success that Tim Burton's movie had, Warner Brothers wanted to obviously bring that in, and because Batman Returns was coming out in 1992,
mhm.
they wanted to have a cartoon series that would bring people into that. That's why the Penguin looks like Danny DeVito's
Danny
Penguin
DeVito.
in Batman the
Yeah.
Animated Series, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's why Michelle Pfeiffer, she's got blonde hair as Catwoman. Well, that's why our Selena Kyle in Batman the Animated Series has blonde hair because it's supposed to be reminiscent of Michelle Pfeiffer's version. So there was some boundaries that like Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, the two people that were obviously bring Tim Burton's vision into this whole process
Hmm.
as well. So with that in mind, they set out, and Eric Radomski, he'd never read a Batman comic, nothing, but he loved Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah.
So you had that with Bruce Timm being like a massive
A
comic book
massive
fan.
fan. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
perfect combination, right?
It is, yeah. It worked really well because Eric Radomski was mainly challenged with the settings, right? Like the aesthetic, the cinematography of Gotham, and Bruce Timm was challenged with obviously creating the characters and what they look like in this world. And then they obviously hired a bunch of producers and writers to come on, became regulars. And that's kind of like the perfect like I don't know if you ever watched Powerpuff Girls, Dion, but at the beginning where it's like sugar, spice,
Oh
everything nice.
yeah.
These are the
Oh yeah.
ingredients to make the perfect little girl or whatever it is. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it was for Batman the Animated Series, right? Like Bruce Timm, Eric Radomski, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett. Like chuck those in a pot, you
It
got
all
the best
worked.
show ever.
Yeah, and it all came together
Yeah.
like effortlessly because from that first episode, like we talked about, I was hooked from that because I think,
Mm.
and this is what goes. um, this is my thought on just Batman in general. And when it comes to like live action Batman to this day, I'm tired of real world Batman. Like I'm very not I'm tired. It's just
Me too.
it's been done a lot. Uh, say what you
Mm,
want. Ben Affleck gave me the most, cartoon like actiony character Batman. I'm at a loss for words. He gave me one. He gave me an animated Batman almost. He was swinging on his grappling on
mm.
his with his grappling gun. It's like the scene from Justice League. He swings in, like what kicks a parademon, throws a bat. Like that's what I want to see. I want to see him fighting
Right.
other things other than just cleaning up the streets of Gotham. Sometimes, um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and that show gave you that. Like that show gave us Clayface, and
yeah.
just those characters, like Croc. It gave us that. Like those shows. I don't know if real world will get us there, but I'm ready for like just take this show and make a movie. That's all I'm saying. Just take this
Ex-
show
exactly.
and make a movie. But again, so we're gonna jump on into what I think is like the biggest part of like why this show hits so hard is because of the voice acting. Kevin Conroy as Batman
Yep.
and Bruce Wayne is I can't read a comic book without hearing his voice as Batman. I can't imitate
I
Batman
agree.
without doing his voice as Batman, right? So just
Yep.
what were your thoughts on like the voice cast and the portray and Kevin Conroy's portrayal on Batman? Because this is the really first we had him in Super Friends, we had all that, but this is like his show. He set the tone for it and would go on to play Batman for what 25 more years, give or
Hmm.
take. So just your thoughts on that voice cast and just Kevin Conroy in general.
Of course, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Reading a comic, it's got to be Kevin Conroy's voice. He will always be my Batman. And
Same.
as sad as it is that he's gone, and we've had some great guests come on our show that worked with him. Obviously, either voice actors, writers,
Mm-hmm.
directors, producers. They've all had lovely things to say about him, which has been really great. But the thing that I love most is that he's always got so because he did it for 25 years. We have so much Batman content for him, and it's
Thanks.
so sad he's
Yes.
gone, but like I will always be able to go back and he will always be there as my Batman. So that's really nice. But besides his passing, just as the character is so brilliantly portrayed, because he was the first person to step into that role and go, oh, Bruce Wayne is the mask. Batman is the real
It's the
face,
real face. Yeah.
you know? And that was incredible to me because I think that's just a genius way. It's a very stage actor because he was classically trained. It's a
Hmm.
very great state. It's a very classically trained thing to do when you're approaching a role like that. And he even with the voice, I mean, he eventually does kind of bring his Batman voice and his Bruce Wayne voice kind of in the same like pitch, but
Hmm.
the first few seasons of Batman the animated series, he's like dark and I'm Batman. And then
Yeah.
he's on the phone as Bruce Wayne. He's like, "Oh, hi Doc.
Oh,
How you
hi.
doing? Yeah, sure. Yeah, like you're like, "Whoa, that's so different." And it's genius. I love that. And I related to that a lot as well. I kind of told you off pod that I moved to America at a very young age, and in order to fit in there, I eventually had to like change my accent. Like I did have American accent for quite a bit when I was
Hmm.
younger, just so I could fit in. And I was like, that's so interesting is that Kevin Conroy's Bruce Wayne was his version of fitting in, right?
Yeah.
Like that was his way of being like, I'm just a normal guy in Gotham, and even going deeper than that, he spoke about like, he had a hard childhood with his parents and such like that, and he had a really hard time growing up, and also he was gay and he had a really hard time, in the
Yeah.
80s and the 90s. You couldn't really be an actor and talk about that in New York, especially. So again, that's another way of hiding who you really are, right? By like
Hmm.
that, and he got to do that as both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Like, here's the authentic self, and
Yeah.
here's the self that I want everyone to see. And I think that's just the best version you could possibly do for Batman. It's so perfect because it ticks all the boxes. So, and also he's got the coolest voice ever. Like even if he didn't do all those things, his voice
Exactly,
is just
right?
like wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so commanding. And again, we've
It's
had
amazing.
we had Michael Keaton's voice, which I thought was very subtle, and it's one of my favorites too. Like his Batman voice is one of my favorites too. But for Kevin Conroy to sort of put the flip on it, where, like you said, a little darker tone in the first few like episodes or seasons, whatever, but then they sort of meld it together a little bit.
Mm,
But that voice is just like that's the voice I hear. That's the voice when I think of Batman. Like that's the one I've imitated the most. I've
yeah.
okay, imitated the most, yes. Try Christian Bale's voice a lot just because it makes me laugh sometimes.
Sure.
You know, where are the drugs going? That sort of
Yeah, yeah,
voice,
yeah.
you know, like that. But his was so like effortless, and Batman, the character, was just so like effortless too, to a degree where like, here's his understanding of a topic, here's his answer. He was very like to the point, and it covered from there all the way through Justice League, all the way through the Arkham games. Like just his voice again. Thankfully, we had like 25 years of Kevin Conroy to be voicing Batman. I think we get him one last time in the Suicide Squad video game that's finally coming out after like 3 years of being announced, I think. So I think that's his last role
Right.
as Batman in that game. So if you want me to buy that, just say that and I'll go get it, because I'm gonna remember him from this animated series, and that's
Yeah.
why I fell in love with him, right? But even with Kevin Conroy, you got Luke Skywalker as Joker of all people, right? So
Mm,
what was like
you do. Yeah.
just overall thoughts of like Mark Hamill playing the Joker and being the Joker's voice of like the last what
Hmm.
25 years as well. Like they're joined at the hip at this point.
Mark Hamill's Joker is again the perfect Joker, the voice that I hear when I read the Joker and any other iteration. Because what I love about his Joker is, first of all, he based a lot of his mannerisms and the way he would speak off of Frank Gorshin's Riddler in Batman 66, because Frank Gorshin's Riddler would be like, "It's time to place another riddle," and he would like speak in this and that really, I mean, Mark Hamill kind of applied that to his role as the trickster in the Flash
The
TV show
trickster,
as well.
yeah,
But
that's it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But he did apply it to the Joker. And the other thing I love about Mark Hamill's Joker, two things actually. One, he's slightly British at points, and I don't know if anyone's noticed that, but there are moments where I'm like, did you study abroad for like a year or something in London? Because he'll say things like "tar," which means thank you over here, or he'll say like in Joker's favor, like, "There's your 2 cents. Now, what are you going to do to me?" And you're like, that was so British there at the end, the way he said that. So
It
I've
is
always
weird
been
now
like,
since you said that. He really
yeah,
does slip in and out, doesn't he?
he does. He slips in and out. And again, as a kid that had both an American and English accent, I was like, I pick up on that stuff. So I've always thought that was funny and weird. But what I love most about his Joker is he doesn't just take on one side of the Joker. He's not like, I'm the scary clown, or I'm the unpredictable chaos, or
Hmm.
I'm the fun jester that's like giggling and like, having fun at Batman's expense. He's every single component of any type of Joker you've ever seen, wrapped up into this like beautiful purple and green bow. He's so good. Even his laugh, there's like 50 different iterations of how his laugh, depending on his mood.
Depending
There's
on it,
like
yeah.
I'm happy Joker, I'm evil Joker, I'm like sinister Joker, I'm like stalking Joker. There's a laugh for every mood. It's crazy.
Now the sinister like laugh is like my favorite. Not the maniacal. We're gonna put these into categories, right? Or give these names. So his maniacal one I felt like was always like the high one, like that he's just like evil to be evil, right? But it was
Sure.
always those scenes where like his voice got lower and his tone changed, and you could tell like the seriousness had just been brought. Fun guy, right? But then his
Yeah.
seriousness has been brought to here,
Scary.
and
Yeah.
he's like, and I know we talked about it earlier, but that animation style really drove it home too, because just the way that it looked, how much depth that it had, it wasn't like just an evil cartoon drawing or character come alive. Like you saw like the quiver and the move of his lips
Mm.
when he like got into that zone of it just focused in. And Mark Hamill, again, that's the only voice I hear too. Like that's the voice I hear as Joker as well. It's funny to listen back to
Yep.
Tim Curry, who was originally
Yeah.
casted as Joker. That's a different experience that I was like, it could have worked maybe, but I don't know. So
I'm
what do
so
you
glad we didn't get that, man. Like, yeah.
just for the Tim Curry voice alone, after hearing that and knowing like, okay, this is how he would have sounded, I don't think it would have worked. I like Tim Curry. I like him in, I don't know, Home Alone 2. Like I like him in that.
Yeah. Have a
But
lovely day. That's what he says. Yeah, I love that.
but after I'm with you, Alex. They made the right choice of
Yeah.
sidestepping Tim Curry and going on with Mark Hamill because he is like synonymous with that voice now. To me, more than Luke Skywalker, but I like Star Wars
Mm.
okay, but I'm like, that's Joker.